All right. Thank you all for coming to this roundtable, talking with people who are running multiple venues, dealing with the pandemic right now, have experience with running multiple venues. And really just before we get going, I wanted to tee up why I wanted to put this together. Over the course of the last 6 months, as we've all been pivoting away from our normal operations and into kind of new lines of thought, I found myself, with even a really core team that were very focused on what we were doing, kind of having a bit of an echo chamber. And so I started reaching out to, peers and people in the industry that I know to kind of hear what their experiences are, what they were speculating on the future. And, through a lot of those conversations with very, very smart people, I kind of came to the conclusion that there's something unique happening with people that are looking at and overseeing multiple venues or multiple businesses associated with our industry, and that the calculus was a little bit different. There was a weight of responsibility in dealing with large teams, sometimes in different cities. There's investors and all sorts of financial obligations jockeying around. There's dealing with vendors at a different level, and ultimately it was the maneuvering between a lot of those variables that I found to be really unique. So while the group here today is often has their hands in lots of different pots, I think because of that, you all have really unique perspective on how to navigate the current challenges and maybe what the future looks like. This group around the table, everyone's going to introduce themselves in a minute, but they represent various interests, be it running tons of venues, down to running a few, or maybe running a venue with different, businesses in the hospitality industry. Some folks who are very kind of niche and specialized within a group, say running bar programs, or some folks who have a history of working multi-venue but aren't currently doing so and kind of waiting on the sidelines to get through and be able to jump back in. So with that, I'd love to allow everyone an opportunity just to introduce themselves very quickly, just where you're coming from, the status of kind of your work or your businesses, and a little curveball, one on a personal level, one tiny little thing throughout all of this that has made your life maybe just a little bit less shitty. So I want to start out with Alexis Soler. Oh, you're on mute.
I always start that way.
Me too.
I own and operate Old Glory and Flamingo Cocktail Club and Number 308, which I have a pop-up going on right now called Camp in Nashville, Tennessee. We are currently running at half capacity, and we're open. We just got our hours extended from 10:30 to 11. So that's just kind of where we're at.
Awesome. Thank you. Andrew?
Yeah, my name is Andrew Abrahamson. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Pouring with Heart. We have 23 bars and breweries based in Los Angeles, California, but we also operate in San Diego, in Austin, Texas, and in Denver. And we're only currently operating 2 of those. We have one of our breweries in LA is open, and one of our bars in Denver is open. Everything else is currently shut down. And one small thing that has made my life better, Alex, has been that with operating in 3 different states, I do a lot of traveling, and rarely do I get to spend time home. And I've been home with my wife for 6 months straight, and it's been incredible.
Hear, hear. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. Bobby?
Yeah, I'm Bobby Hiddleston. I own and operate the 2 Swift bars in London. Currently, we are open, but there's new regs coming out in London, in Britain right now, that could change that. We don't know. It's all in the air at the moment. But a positive of lockdown is, like I said, I've not traveled at all, and it's been great. Really reconnecting with life and losing that. It's been wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you. Eddie?
Hi, actually it's Edie. Edie.
Sorry.
It's okay. So previously to this, I was working with Pure Grey, which is a Marriott International restaurant group. And I was mainly in Middle East, Africa, Caribbean, Latin America, the US. And then right before this, I was Director of Food and Beverage of the Edition Times Square. with John Fraser. And during all of this right now, I'm the general manager of the North Fork Table and Inn in the North Fork of Long Island. So not the Hamptons, the other side. It's been very interesting opening up and operating and really being on the floor with guests and with people, being there, 50% capacity, being in a bit more of a fine dining setting, and it's been good. I think something that made my life a little less shitty was I got to spend a lot of time on my dad's farm a bit, and then and be in the mountains in North Carolina, as well as hang out with friends that usually in the industry you see them maybe when you go into the restaurant. So it was nice.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Alexis Belton. Oh, on mute.
I did it. There it is. Hey everyone, Alexis, here in Chicago, Illinois. We run 2 bars here, the Aviary and the Office. Oftentimes help out with some of the beverage programming at Next and Alinea as well. We are open and running currently. We were doing to-go for a little while during that stretch over the summer, then opened up again for about 2 months now. And silver lining, it's really hot here right now. We have all the doors open for service because we have a big patio. So we've changed our uniform to allow people to be a little bit more casual, and it's really nice to work in jeans and a t-shirt for once.
Nice, thank you. Juan?
Hi, my name is Juan Correa, and I am one of the co-owners and operate Lama Inn and Lama San. Lama Inn, as you may know, is in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and Lama San is in the West Village of New York. And we are currently open for outdoor dining at both locations, and looking forward to get started on October 1st with indoor dining at our 25% capacity that the governor has generously granted us. So it's a challenge, but good. And I think the bright light for us has been specifically, I think, at Lama Inn, that our neighbors and our community have been so excited to have us back and just be such an integral part of the neighborhood. That's super rewarding. That's why we're all in the business, I think.
That's great. Leo?
I am Leo Robacek. I'm the VP of Food and Beverage for Sidell Group and one of the partners at Nomad. We currently have 11 properties and only 4 of them are open, or 5 actually. So we have the line in DC and the line in Austin that are open. We were able to open the Nomad in New York City on the 3rd of September. We actually have a rooftop space that's an event space that we're doing 3 meals a day and breakfast, lunch, and dinner currently. And we're actually opening Nomad Vegas at the end of this month, Nomad LA on the 8th, as well as Nomad London, which is actually a new property that's opening in December. So there's a bit going on. Yeah, something that for me gave me a little bit of joy during the pandemic is we started working with World Central Kitchen, and we got to pivot, bring back some staff in April and start cooking meals for people in need, which has been pretty incredible. I think in this industry, we don't do surgery. We're not doctors, but what we do is provide experiences. And it really solidified sort of the nobility of what we do, seeing the joy in people's faces when you're able to both, give them a meal or a warm meal, but also just reopening, seeing the joy in people's faces when they're able to interact with other humans and create experiences. So that's what has definitely kept me moving and motivated.
Awesome. Thanks, Leo.
Yeah.
Neil?
Hey everyone, I'm Neil Bodenheimer. I'm the managing partner of CureCo, which is 3 properties, Cure, Canaan Table, and our newest, which is called Val's, which we opened during the pandemic because we were out of money and we had to open it. Luckily it's a lot of outdoor dining, which is helpful. We have a licensing deal at the New Orleans airport for Cure, and we have a few other projects in the works that we'll see what happens with all those. I would say that it's been very interesting in New Orleans because we've been in multiple phases and then gone back. We had a really bad idea at the beginning of the pandemic, which was to hold Mardi Gras, which created a really hot spot. So we've kind of been paying the price for that pretty consistently down here. The state of Louisiana is in stage 3 or phase 3, and then New Orleans is still in phase 2. No takeout drinks. The one city where takeout drinks have always been around, we actually can't do them at all anymore, which is kind of counterintuitive. I think the thing that has kept me sane is using a lot of profanity and my team for this.
Hear to that. Thank you, Neil. Roberto.
Hi, my name is Roberto de Cilla. I'm the co-founder of Jungle Bird, La Factoría, Caneca, and Licoria Miramar, and also Puerto Rico Cocktail Week. I have a lot on my hands right now and a lot of employees to face up. So what is giving me a little bit of relaxing time has been able to spend a couple of days with my baby, my family, and also working in cars, because that's my other part. I love cars, so yeah, I got a lot of fun for that.
Nice. Thank you. Ryan.
So my name is Ryan Chaithy-Wardner, despite the name my cat has given me on Zoom. And I'm based in London. We used to have 2 properties here. We sadly lost Cub, which was our little restaurant, to the circumstances of the landscape at the moment. But we have Lioness on South Bank, which is now open. We have Super Lion in Amsterdam, which is also open. That was the first one that we managed to get relaunched. And then Washington, DC, obviously it was amazing to pick up the award at the Spirit Awards yesterday. But sadly, we don't have Silver reopened just yet. So we're kind of building up to try and work out what's the kind of safest timeline to put in for that. So of 4 venues, we're 2 live, and kind of trying to understand what it looks like across the board and trying to just react to the kind of daily updates that come both in from Europe and also trying to understand what it means for the States. I've also had the fun of being high risk, so I haven't left my house for the last 6 months or so. But I've been very fortunate that I live with one of the world's best chefs. So I've been stuck in a house, but have been just slowly getting fatter over the period. So it's been kind of a weirdly kind of great time to be able to chat kind of creative projects with Doug, who also has been a kind of business partner at various different points, and to just kind of revel in his genius for a period to kind of keep me ticking over while I'm squirreling away on a laptop.
Amazing. Thanks, Ryan. And lastly, Trevor.
Hi, everyone. My name is Trevor Callies. I'm the bar and beverage director for the Donnelly Group in Vancouver and Toronto. Pre-COVID-19, we were 14 pubs and cocktail bars in Vancouver, 4 venues in Toronto. Currently, we've been able to reopen 8 venues in Vancouver and only 3 in Toronto. But about a week and a half ago, our provincial government decided to roll back closing hours. So we've got a 10 p.m. curfew for last call now. Bars can stay open until 11 if they serve food, but last call is 10. So we'll see what happens there. We might lose 1 or 2 venues until the curfew goes away, but we're playing it by ear right now and just trying to run really tight and really lean. In terms of the silver lining to this whole thing, just being at home for the last 6 months, I've been able to, really dig into like stacks and stacks of books and, cocktail books, cookbooks, novels, and nonfiction that I've accumulated over the last, 15 years and not had a chance to read. So that's been a little bit of an outlet for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. I'm Alex Day. I am a partner in a company called Gin and Luck, which is most known for our cocktail bars, Deaf & Co. in New York, Los Angeles, and Denver. Also a partner in a consulting company called Proprietors LLC, which does a number of things in the services capacity around the country and globally. And also a partner in a tiny little bar on the Lower East Side called Nightcap, which is adorable and covered in glitter, and I miss it desperately. Cool. Oh, and my silver lining, much like Andrew, I spend most of my time, or many of you do too, on airplanes. And in the last 6 months, that has come to a grinding halt. And while I desperately miss the Delta Lounge, being home with my husband for all this time has been amazing. We haven't killed each other, so I'm happy to report that that's fantastic, and really a nice surprise. Who knew? Cool. Well, let's get into the meat of it. I've spent so much of the last 6 months rebuilding our business plans and trying to like navigate navigate what is happening now with speculation on what's happening in the future. And in the process, we've asked ourselves a lot of questions of like, what does success like this year mean? Like, if we got to the end of this year and we accomplished something, would we feel successful, or what would that success look like? And then, following that, what would success in like the next 12 months be? Anyone have any thoughts around that?
I mean, I think a lot of what people have been kind of talking about is, trying to get back to normality. And I think there's a degree of that where success was, I think a lot of people have kind of switched to a survival mode, and there's, we lost a business. There's been, we've had to scale back in terms of some of the growth, both from things like our kind of creative agency, but the venues, the people that we had on board, what we had as plans to be able to kind of increase those. And, to me, I think the success would be being able to kind of reintroduce that stability we had prior to this. There was a lot of work that had gone into growing the teams, getting them empowered, and feeling like we're in a solid position to then start to kind of push forward. And we've been, set back quite far from that. So I think getting out of survival mode and into something that felt just a little bit more of a kind of foundation, albeit a chance to kind of rebuild and reassess those foundations, but being able to get back to that point where it feels like we can start, doing all of the dumb stuff that we used to in the past. That would be an amazing feeling of success. I think it would be very satisfying to be able to get close to that position again. Sorry, Andrew, I cut you off.
I think the same way as Ryan. I feel like not running on low energy and just being able to run our business as we were supposed to do before the pandemic, I think it will be a success.
Yeah, Andrew, what do you think? I know you're considering all of these venues in many different states.
It's so challenging because for this year it's changed multiple times, and at one point we were looking like maybe it's only going to be 3 months, and we very much thought we'd be back open by summer. We got a shot at it, and everywhere except for Denver we were shut down within weeks. So at that point we had to sadly lay off our whole company. And to me that's been the biggest hardship of this whole thing is so many employees that didn't have anywhere to go. The industry was shut down, so laying them off, they're dependent on a measly little bit of unemployment to get by. And so success this year is honestly just surviving it, unfortunately. Yeah. Success next year would be being able to reemploy everybody and just leave it at that. And that would be, in my mind, a huge victory.
Mm-hmm.
We've got a little saying that we've been using, which is you've got to survive to thrive. And that's just like a mantra for us. And I think sure everybody on this call agrees, like survival is a big win out of this year and hopefully out of next year.
I think it's also survival, not only through the end of this year. I think for us that are New York centric is survival through the end of the winter, right? Which is, let's make sure we're out of these, let's declare victory in April of 2021. And then refocus. It's really hard to understand. I think this next 3 months are probably going to be better than January, February, and March of 2021. So we're really focused on that. Survival is the name of the game, and take care of our staff. Just make sure that we're doing everything that we can to operate as safely as possible, even in this 25% capacity scenario that we just don't know how it's going to play out here.
Mm-hmm. Look, I agree with everyone here. Obviously, keeping a business open and alive and rehiring your staff is really important. And that is definitely one measure of success, but I think also a more long-term measure of success. And sadly, even if you can't reopen a business, is creating a more equitable industry in general. I think that there's a lot of really, really horrible stuff that has happened this year, but some of the silver lining is that there are conversations that haven't been had, or at least now there's more people receptive to hearing these conversations. So I think this industry has made us see the inequities in the industry, but also this industry has made us see that it's not a stable industry. The fact that, you know, closing for such a short time really destroyed all of us shows you that we need to figure out a way in order to make this industry that we all love and adore a more stable industry and something that could be or exist in the long term.
So Leo, I'm curious if, you know, as you're considering multiple, you know, talking about equity and making a better industry out of this, like you have a strong hand that you can play in that. Are there specific initiatives that you're looking at across your organization to begin the path down that?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're lucky that we're not a large business, but we have a little bit more disposable income because we're within a hotel, or we have hotels. So some of the things that we did, obviously, we're looking at just the equity within our own practices and our service manuals and our hiring practices. We did hire an equity trainer, not just for one day. It's something that will be ongoing to make sure that we are really looking at our internal systems, but also learning to listen and learning to affect change tomorrow, but will be for the future. You know, something else for us too is the charitable component. You know, I unfortunately got sick during this pandemic, and one thing that I did notice, like I said, was just the amount of gratitude that people had over a meal, especially in these crazy times. So working for us is something that we're not going to do just for the short term. It's something that we're trying to put in our business for the long term and trying to figure out a way to not only feed the 1% like we normally do, but also figure out a way that we're going to be able to, you know, feed people that are less fortunate than us.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else working on, you know, I guess this kind of dials in a little bit to how our frame of mind has perhaps shifted. And, you know, while that is in a way tied to success in that we want to create a better work environment, a better industry altogether, and a better kind of, you know, segment of the economy, materializing that is a big challenge, and it requires a kind of different focus on certain parts of our business. Have there been big blind spots or other faults in the industry, in your business actually specifically, that has been exposed by this whole situation?
I think it's been a fun shift, focusing, you know, we're all hyper-focused on what happens behind the bar, at least for me. And I think like more so things have like pulled out because everyone's seated. So people, you know, you have to approach the table instead of people approaching you. So it's just like taking the energy away from the bar and shifting the idea of like what hospitality is. And I think that's like a really interesting point, that like service is changing. And I think that's something that we can like take with us, whether things return to a normal place or whether they don't, which I don't see that really necessarily happening anytime soon. So it's just more fun to like recreate what is already, you know, where we are. You know, change is inevitable, you know, and we have to keep up. Like one of the things about our industry is we get to like, we are resilient and we do like think quickly on our feet, and we understand what that looks like. So I think, you know, why not apply it to now? It's like a perfect application. So
I completely agree. I also feel like there's a lot more planning that's involved in terms of service. I mean, everyone, when it's starting to get cold, everyone's thinking about heaters and how we can still keep people comfortable outside, and thinking about those extra steps with what makes them more comfortable, whether it's outside or having that extra hand sanitizer somewhere, or making sure that they're seeing what you're doing. Because, you know, you bring the dirty dishes back in the kitchen, they don't see you wash your hands every time, even though we are. So it's making sure that those non kind of verbal cues are also there. and whether that's communication that's being put directly onto the table, or whether it's just, you know, seeing those things throughout even, you know, a fine dining establishment is super important for their comfort, whether mentally or also physically.
Trevor, do you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things that I noticed right away after we reopened is, I mean, communication with staff. Like, we don't really have a big opportunity to do the group pre-shifts any longer. You know, we're trying to keep staff like not gathered together in one place. So training groups, we're trying to figure out opportunities on how we're actually going to get people trained when no one wants to read an email and nobody wants to digest like a long book of, you know, content and whatnot. You know, inventory is another big one for us. Like, how do we keep things really, really low and lean just in case there's another, you know, another flare up or a second wave of shutdowns. You know, we had like basically could have funded liquor store upon liquor store product across the 14 venues when we shut down.
Yeah.
It's really hard to turn that product back into cash.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I think this is some nitty-gritty operational stuff that I think is super fascinating, and the different tactics that we've had to employ. You know, we closed down our shops, and for us, we closed all 3 of them on all the Death & Co's anyway on March 15th. And it's been said over and over again that the inertia of a restaurant and bar does not stop. You know, our expenses continue piling up, et cetera. We're also sitting on all this inventory. So, you know, for us programmatically, and many of you too, we're known for these very focused offerings that are presented in a way that are very engaging. And then suddenly we're confronted with this reality where we're not picking up the phone and calling distributors anytime soon. We're going to use as much of our product as we possibly can. And so that means a whole different pivot programmatically in what we're offering. You know, it's no longer you know, for safety reasons, the big leather bound book of 40 cocktails doesn't really make any sense in this environment. But now we need to be changing it constantly, which means not only, you know, pivoting what those offerings are, but making sure it's designed correctly. Have anyone, any other like tactics or kind of major operational challenges that anyone has faced in trying to get reopened and, you know, have a sustainable path?
I think for us, one of the big blind spots that we discovered was not getting information from frontline staff quick enough, and trying to lead too much from our point of view and our position, and not forcing them into a position to tell us what they need. And that's it. We've done more or less an entire organizational change throughout this process, and it really has kind of taken our HQ operations out of the equation and forced the decision making onto the ground level, into the bars themselves. I think that's going to actually really benefit us. Even if we go back to normal in a couple of years, that'll still be a better way to move, and ultimately create a better experience.
It's interesting. So like, how is that, you know, is that from just making decisions on the ground level, or what does that autonomy look like versus how it was before for you?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be a true paradigm shift in how we look at it and how we converse with our staff. And it's going to be about establishing from day one that they're going to be expected to have autonomy, and they're going to be expected to step up and run their operations as they see fit and make decisions on the fly. So we're trying to really pull back and create our brand through just some core defining principles, but not be so nitpicky to the moment-to-moment experience in each one of our venues. And really, as long as they're fundamentally achieving the principles of our organization, then they can do service however they see fit, and do best by the customers in the bars themselves.
Interesting.
I actually have a question with that. So what I've seen, and I'm lucky enough to be with, you know, a group with John Fraser, where everybody from headquarters is really in the operation as well. You know, everyone has a front of house or back of house position in some way, or they did before they start to transition and to try to open up the next place. So I feel like a lot of that upper level headquarters kind of viewpoint is almost like it's because they're in the operation. So where are you all at with that as well? And what do you think about, you know, the kind of like upper level going farther into the operation and seeing how things are, especially with decisions that have to be made?
Yeah. Like how we're structuring it is we're really focusing around the GM. And so we're creating that position as the ultimate decision maker in each venue. And it's our job to set some really simplistic expectations for for the performance of the bar, but really how they achieve that and get there is going to be up to them. And I guess the core idea is just be behind them taking more ownership. That by giving them more ownership, they'll take more ownership, and that'll inherently create a better experience. And the moment that we get in there and start trying to say that, yes, I have experience myself, and I think it's going to be better this way, but ultimately I'm not going to be there to execute it day in, day out. And so if they're trying to execute what I think is best, they maybe can only achieve 70% of that vision, but whatever they believe to be best, they'll probably achieve 100% of it, and that will be a better approach in the long term.
Edie, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because it's to me, it's not even about like, have they worked in a space and do they know, how to run a kitchen or how to run a dining room. For us, it's actually been, everyone has been so separate because people have gone either to their parents' homes or other places, and everyone has a very different COVID experience. So what's happening in London is completely different than what's happening in New York. It's completely different than what's happening in Vancouver. It's completely different than what's happening in LA, completely different what's happening in Maine. So for us making these decisions, when you have other people around the table who have a very different viewpoint and a very different fear on COVID, has actually been a little crippling. So people that haven't been in New York the whole time, and for us to try to convince, some of our other partners that aren't in New York that opening outdoor dining in New York is a smart thing to do, especially when it was allowed, when all that anyone ever saw was New York is burning, like New York is like a death trap. Nobody wants to go out in New York. And you're like, well, I walk around every day in the streets and I see thousands of people drinking, in the park. Everyone's like fine. So for us, that's actually been one of our hardest points. Like right now, we're trying to set up London with the team that's out there. And we are more risk averse than London is. Like London is like, oh, you don't need to wear a mask. Oh, you can drink while being outside. And for us, it's so foreign because everyone here is like, this is what you need to do. But in Europe, it's so completely different right now. They're like, no, that's not what you need to do. Yeah. So that's actually been a really huge hurdle for us in trying to get everyone on the same page. But not only all of our team, it's trying to figure out what will make guests comfortable in each one of those settings, because it is so drastically different from city to city and from country to country.
So do you, to be as efficient as possible towards that goal, do you find yourself establishing sort of an updated baseline for what your operational and service expectations are, and then allow or have the breathing room for individuality within the spaces?
A little bit of both, I guess. It's like even the restrictions between LA and New York are so completely different. They're stricter in some sort of ways in New York and stricter in some ways in LA. And then we have our own restrictions because we want all of our staff to feel safe as well. So for instance, in LA, everyone needs to wear face shields when they're on the floor. In New York, you have to wear a mask.
Right.
And as of now in London, you have to wear a mask, but guests didn't have to wear a mask until recently. It was suggested. Or like here, you need to have plexi when you go check in a hotel to make sure that your staff is protected. We're trying to tell the team in London that they need to put plexi in front of the host stand. They're like, no, everyone would freak out. It's so completely different. And it's hard to wrap your head around because it's fear that like you live in this fear of like, this is what I am told is right during these times. And then when you go to a different city or a different country, you're told that something else is right. Mm-hmm. So it is difficult, but it's a lot of listening and learning, and also a lot of just being collaborative in that way. It's also a lot of research. The amount of research that I'm doing, reading every single day, the regulations in New York and LA or London, because they change all the time and nobody ever tells you that they change. So.
That's extremely dynamic, the things that change day to day in both cities, Toronto and Vancouver. Like there's new restrictions, new regulations, new recommendations, and a lot of the time it's a recommendation and not a regulation. So many venues can just pick and choose which ones they want to operate under and find the best balance for what their model is.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to see the disconnect even from one province to another or one state to another. I mean, there's disconnect between states and cities. And that's been, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we've seen down here is that we can't get a straight answer. So what you're seeing is that people are really focusing and I've seen this in London too, guys, like it's let's put together this one general policy and it'll work or basically not work for everybody, and then there's no enforcement. And with no enforcement, some people step out of the policy and some people live by it, and it's a terrible situation.
Yeah, I think what we're all most living in is just the uncertainty of everything. Like, we're all at the mercy of our respective governments. We all have these rules that we have to abide to. You also see our neighbours around the corner quite frequently not listening to them. So we have to go, okay, we're doing this. Why are you not doing this? We're doing everything we can. And London, all of England has got new rules coming in from Thursday, and that we have to have a curfew, much like parts of Canada as well. So we are somewhat pessimistic as to how this is going to affect us, because it's going to affect, obviously, all hospitality to close at 10 o'clock at night. So we're not sure how to address this situation. It's just one of these ones we just have to go completely at the hands of the government. And how does a system, how does a whole industry deal with the problem?
At least you guys get one voice, though. You're given one regulation. It's, in our wonderful country over here, there's what happens federally, what happens statewide, and what happens citywide. And a lot of times they're all competing. And then even further than that, there's a Department of Transportation that deals with all outdoor dining here in New York. They go around and they monitor 3,000 venues a week. Then there's also the Department of Health, and then there's also the State Liquor Authority, and they all have their own regulations that you have to adhere to. So it's a bit of fun.
Super fun. And now, like in LA, I'm not sure if anyone saw this, but we have an open streets initiative essentially there as well, that in theory you can block off a part of a street, but there have been something like 1,400 applicants and 50 approvals, and the city just doesn't have any cash to deal with any things. So the economics of very little taxation, the state's not making money, being in crisis, is then compounding and impacting our ability to reoperate. And it's sort of, these are the kind of moments as I look at multiple cities and do the type of research Leo was talking about, and trying to understand the whole equation, how it's all going to fit together, that really starts scaring me when you kind of see it on a macro level. And it's definitely the thing that keeps me up at night more than anything else.
Let's be honest, you just can't plan right now. That's the problem. It's a problem for all of us.
We're in an industry and businesses where we have the power of our planning is fundamental to survival, right? So being, like I mentioned before, every couple of weeks we've rebuilt our business models because some rule change, which impacted $1 over here, which meant that 5 cents that we would make out of it that goes over there isn't going to come in, or it's going to be different, right? And we got to understand what that is, because cash flows are king right now. But it's a whole new territory, right? Where before you had expectations about a business's performance that you could plan on, and you get better and better at it, and your projections get tighter and tighter. But then the world fucking changed, right? And we don't know what that looks like. And even if it's not about percentages, right? Because it's not about 25% indoor dining capacity. It's about the social norms that have changed. Much like Leo was talking about, the staff's experiences are very different. It's about how people are engaging in those hours of operation. It's just so much different. So all of that in this current moment sometimes leads me down pessimistic rabbit holes, if you will. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that too. What have been some of the things that have gotten you out of those rabbit holes and those kind of moments of crisis, when you look at, ostensibly anyway, look at the big picture of all of everything you're doing and worry about the future? No optimism, I see.
I like to look to history, because history does repeat itself. And historically, as a civilization, we've been through plenty of pandemics, far worse than this. And we have the technology, we have the scientists, we have people on it. I think historically, whenever you're in the midst of a hardship, it can feel pretty overwhelming. But then once you get past it and get through it, it in hindsight wasn't as bad as it maybe felt. So I do have a lot of optimism that, yeah, we're in it right now and it sucks, but there's going to come a point, and I hope it's going to be next year, and I hope a vaccine is going to trigger it, but there will come a point where this does move behind us and things will return to normal.
and I think you have to also take the successes. I think, yes, they're little and they're kind of fewer and far between, but even seeing the responses, like nobody wants to be idle. We're all like tactile people that love the chaos of our world, and being thrown into a point where you couldn't do any of that. Like, yes, we're all loving the fact that we're not having to get on a plane every other day, but I think it's been really nice to see, I think just the teams being able to get back in front of people, look after people, the things that they love, and you see the reports, and that's what we all love this for. And to Alexis's point before, we're all very good at like being able to adapt and problem solve. And so once we've been able to kind of, there's been such a lack of clarity for everybody here. Like, the governments have not done a great job of this across the board. And so just being able to finally focus in and go, okay, this is what we're going to aim at, this is what we're going to solve, and it might just be a short-term thing, but it becomes a satisfaction, and it allows us to kind of kick back all those things that we used to do on a regular basis. And it's been really nice to see. Not that I haven't been able to physically be there, but like interacting with the teams, getting them like creative again, getting them looking at some of these things, and getting them being able to look after guests again. I think it's been like I think it's what we kind of have to focus on at the moment, because as you talked about, it's not very rosy, and it feels like survival mode. So any of those little things that do come up as like a positive of, I don't know, they felt very empowering. Each step we take, even if we've got to take a step back, it's felt like a little bit of a tick, something to be able to kind of focus in on and hold on to.
Little victories.
I quite like the positivity that's kind of come about the industry as a whole. I mean, prior to this, there was elements of it being somewhat fractured in that everyone meant well, but there was a kind of superficiality to it. There was almost kind of like a slight kind of theme of backstabbing. And I think that's kind of all melted away. We've all got a good big common cause now. We're all kind of here and all going, like, genuinely feeling actually just wanting everyone to pull through and do really well. There's no false bravado. There's no, oh yeah, we're doing fantastic, when you're not. Everyone is being more honest with each other and going, actually, really fighting on this one. And everyone gives, in my opinion, much more sincere feedback. And I'm just really like that kind of element that's coming out of this.
That is a fair point. We are part of this organization called ROAR, which is an association of independent restaurants here in New York City. And I'm relatively new compared to many others in the restaurant industry, but in my 6 or 7 years that I've been doing this, I've never had the opportunity to interact with fellow operators or chefs and exchange ideas, exchange information, and suddenly this has happened very naturally, and I think it is good. I think it's a progress. I think we are by inherently somewhat cagey as an industry, and we keep information away from each other, and I think we've found strength in sharing more about our experiences and how to do things better. And I think that is really important going forward, at least.
I think also finally having people come out in a safe way and celebrate their anniversaries that they've missed and their birthdays and just all the little moments that you're so used to seeing. It's been really lovely, having people come in and they're super grateful, and most are very patient, so it's really nice to have them kind of have their celebrations with us again, and kind of see that that's still like a light at the end of the tunnel for the future as well.
I think there's just really, the positivity is in getting back to the work. And I know for all of us, as you get multiple venues, you get a little disconnected from what happens every day in a venue. And getting back to the basics, which is why we all love the business. Like, that's been one of the best things for me. And, and Alex has heard me talk about this, like one of the things that we learned kind of after Katrina in New Orleans is that you have to take it day by day. When you zoom out, it's too overwhelming. And so every day is a different day. Every day, try and stack a few wins, and to get to tomorrow to stack a few more.
And to add on to what Neil just said, kind of stepping into the roles that maybe you haven't been in a long time. when I started at the aviary, I started there as a front of house. I was a food runner, became an expediter, then worked on the bar, then became a bar manager. And so I think over the last 7 years, I've kind of forgotten a lot of the things that I had learned prior. And the GM and the chefs and the managers that are running these places at the, at the top tier have forgotten what all the hourly people are doing kind of on the bottom tier. And a lot of us have had to step back into those roles in order to sustain business. And so it's been interesting to be bartending again, or to be running again, or to be managing in a different capacity. And I think it kind of really helps, in a way, put you in someone else's shoes or open your eyes to maybe some of the things that you might not have seen as issues or problems before, and kind of start problem solving on the ground level as well.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and I had a conversation with our GM in Denver, Willie Rosenthal, who's a very thoughtful guy, and we're definitely dealing with some burnout kind of conversations, and we've part of this, to your point, Alexis, is like my frame of reference and my relationship with the people that I directly work with, or how our like accountability charter or org structure ought to be, has kind of been, it isn't disintegrated because the structure is still there and allows for clarity, but the connection to people has been very, very clear for the last 6 months, how important it is to kind of make that step, take that effort, take that time to engage. But he brought up something really that I found both disheartening and fascinating, and identifying what joy is in this industry. Like, so many of us started in this industry and fell in love with it, despite the fact that it was crappy pay, it was long hours, it was grueling work, it was often sometimes miserable situations, but that we always walked away from it at the end of the day with a sense of accomplishment or a sense of joy from it. And in these early parts of operations, where we have all these restrictions on how we need to operate and have an inability to engage our guests the way we used to, that element of joy it was very much absent to some degree, especially in those early days. And I've been focusing, and I guess all of us in the company have been focusing on ways to bring back the joy of that experience. And I'm curious if anyone has found ways to like help their team, not just get a paycheck, or not just kind of tick the itch of like serving people and making drinks, but how to like bring any sense of like the community aspect and the culture of their venues back to life to some degree. If you have any tactics or tips.
I mean, I guess that part's hard. And we're all very hospitable people. We all are very tactile. We all like being around each other. And having to be like a kindergarten teacher when your staff comes back, telling everyone, hey, you got to keep 6 feet away. You can't hug. You can't do this, because honestly, like, one person getting sick could destroy you. You do sit there and you're like, I don't want to be this person. Like, how do I figure out a way to make everyone feel happy? And, I think the first day of service, I was so worried about how everyone would feel. Like, a lot of people were nervous to come back to work. And at the end of first day of service, a lot of people just cried, and they cried because they were happy. The reality is, I didn't even know if we were going to have anyone booking a reservation until the day of. We ended up filling up, and every single person that came in was actually somebody who was a regular. And overwhelmingly, most everyone that came in also had a moment where they were like, this is amazing. Like, you don't understand how much you guys mean to us, like, for us not being able to do this. So I think it's celebrating those little victories, which everyone else mentioned. We've done some cheesy stuff too. Like, everyone's not mandatory, but anyone who wants to participate in the World Central Kitchen has done so. And we've given everyone the opportunity, even if they're not a cook or they're not a chef, to, pitch in and help out. The other day we, did something super cheesy, but it was fun. And we got an ice cream truck to come for our staff, and they social distanced and all went outside and got ice cream in the middle of the shift. And it was just, thinking about what brings you joy as a kid, or what brings you joy are these like memories. And I think going to an ice cream truck always brings me joy. I don't know about everyone else, although I should eat it because. Sorry?
100%. As soon as you said it, I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, we had Mr. Frosty, and I had like soft serve, which I hadn't had in forever. So it's, it cost a few dollars, but it wasn't too expensive, and it was something that the team was like super stoked about. They didn't know about it.
Yeah.
So it's little things like that. Obviously, everyone doesn't have the disposable income to do that, but it's I think it's acknowledgement. It's just letting them know how happy and thankful you are, but also letting them know that you see them as a human being and that you care and that they're your main priority.
I just add, and this goes a little bit to what Alexis was saying, that you know, we're a smaller operation than most of you. We just have 2 restaurants that are mid-sized, but all of us, the partners and owners, work and work the shift. So we decided that particularly at this time, it was really important to work along our staff. And you know, if we're asking them to do something that might feel dangerous, or it feels dangerous to many of them because of the potential exposure to the virus, we were gonna do it with them. And I am there every weekend hosting and serving tables. Eric's on the line pretty much every night, and Lynette is there as well. So for us, that was really important, and to work elbow to elbow with them. And as Alexis pointed out, I mean, no things that you appreciate, do not fully understand, because you're sitting somewhere up there and making decisions based just on numbers or figures that don't really tell you the story as to what's happening in the ground. So that is important, and I think it's appreciated by the staff and by the team members that have been with us for a long time. So we think that's good.
I also think, I mean, it sounds obvious in one sense, and it just sounds like work in the other, but you know, we've always built a lot on the idea of kind of creative ownership of things. And I think to your point about why people stumble into and stay in this industry, I think it is something that gives a lot of joy to people, but I think it also gives a lot of like human satisfaction to be able to be creative in that way. And so trying to find, you know, it is, I've always believed that you need structures around something like that. And even for like hyper creative people, you know, we've not been exposed to lots of stimulus. And so trying to find ways of kind of getting the team back into some of that creativity, I think has given them a satisfaction that's different to, you know, being able to host people and being back together in the bar. So, you know, we've noticed that it's been like, I don't know, I think maybe if it's because it feels a little bit more like normality. Maybe it's because it just takes their mind off all of the other stuff that they are having to deal with, but trying to, you know, use this as a stage to kind of push creativity has been very positive. And it's actually also been, you know, the results have been incredible. We kind of saw it a little bit as just as like a bit of a softer way of getting back into trainings in a way that wasn't, you know, bringing people together in the same way, but it's been an amazing response. And I think it does kind of bring that joy in a different sense.
How are you doing that though? Like what outlet of creativity? I mean, do you mind elaborating?
I mean, yeah, some of it.
I want to apply that.
Same.
Well, we've always tried to do kind of different tasks. Some of it's like, how do we get people to look at kind of lateral thinking in a way, and some of that we were able to do kind of digitally. You know, getting people to kind of look at a task or look at some of the, like, even if it's around language or something like that they can engage with from distance. But even, you know, with Super reopening in Amsterdam, you know, the Dutch were the quickest, it seemed, in terms of our markets about getting on top of stuff. And, you know, we were able to have the teams in the bar. They weren't on furlough. They were there. They obviously were very precautious about distance, but it meant that we could bounce off ideas. And, you know, we dialed in on video and we would chat through different things that we were trying to explore. They would, you know, present something that had been part of their own research, and it allowed us as a team to kind of bounce off each other. And, you know, we've always enjoyed that, and it weirdly worked. I mean, I think, you know, this is an example of the fact that technology has allowed us all in different parts of the world to have a discussion. It's also allowed us to do some of those kind of like more usual interactions that we would do in person, that seemed to actually be quite effective. And it meant that we did a brand new menu. Everything was from scratch for Super. And, you know, I wouldn't have thought that was possible, but, you know, it's partly down to the team on the ground and how much they put into it. But I think it was also just because it felt like a really like positive thing to be able to focus in on the creativity in that way.
That's
I
awesome.
also want to point out, like, we're not the only industry that is hurting right now. And like, for instance, I'm working with a dance group in town, and for the month of October, we're supporting each other and other bars in our community in the city by doing like these like virtual scavenger hunt, for lack of a better word. But you know, you get points for like going to each bar, and social distancing. And there is like a dance, like a movement group, they're performing in each space, and they have to post on social media. So it's like bringing these communities together, I think, is really interesting and really fun, because there are people hurting like across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Out here, we've been working with, you know, a lot of small farmers and then all the vineyards. And of course, the wine industry didn't necessarily take the same hit, but we did some field trips just because we're in the thick of it here in the North Fork. And so it was really lovely. One of our favorite field trips was going to Yennecott Oysters. It's a female owned and operated oyster farm. And so it was just great to kind of have everyone get involved, still be able to social distance, learn a little bit, and kind of get out of their shell and enjoy like an afternoon outside on an oyster farm. So that's like some of the joy, and then also kind of interacting with the local businesses that also really hurt. But I love the virtual scavenger hunt. That sounds amazing.
It's a great idea.
I would do it.
For sure. Cool. Anything anyone wants to talk about? Is there anything anyone struggling with their business that they can't figure out right now? Aside from, you know, not having revenue. That old chestnut.
Trying to find ways to, I guess, maximize labor with, because I'm not the business person for Aviary in office. I don't do the business stuff. I just, you know, I run the bars. And so having people come and tell you that, hey, here's this box, you need to fit everything that you do into, make it work. Really struggling to try to figure out how to pack that box as tight as possible. And I think one of the things that we've learned is that I don't think that we've been bad about labor in the past, but we've had the ability to have overages in certain areas. We've always been, you know, had the luxury of kind of having whatever we need around. Also, I just now realized that our bar is built terribly. Don't tell Micah I said that.
This is recorded.
But it's built for 5 people.
Recorded.
And you can't run the bar without opening every station up. So we're running with 2 people every night, and you're opening up this 5-man bar, and then you're breaking it down at the end of the night. And so I think I'm just really struggling with trying to figure out creative ways to make the bar run like it's supposed to with half the staff that we have, because somebody's saying, here's where you need to be, here's where you are, we need you down here. And it's been kind of a struggle the last few weeks to try to figure out how to be creative about doing that, because we've just never really had to think about that in the past.
On that note, you know, have you, I've been wanting to ask you this all hour. You know, like your experience there is very specific, and it's very well curated, and it has a lot of extravagance in presentation or otherwise. And you know, have you had to change your offerings to reflect the new realities of labor, of what I assume is cost control, like all the other parts of those stressors that are being applied, the box that you have to draw in, and yeah, how has that influenced what you're doing?
That was one of the first things that came up in conversation as we were talking about reopening, and we didn't want to compromise what people expected of us with having limited resources. So we actually turned to kind of things that we knew worked well. We actually went through our old cookbook and we pulled old recipes and started to look at things that we had done well in the past that we knew we could replicate very quickly, service pieces that we knew weren't going to have servers at tables longer than they needed to. So we kind of relied on past successes to help maneuver what was happening now. It did expose a really big gap in some of our areas. Like, we have a pretty intensive ICE program and a pretty large prep program. Our prep staff can be there from 10 to 12 hours a day. I've pulled like a 12, 14 hour day doing prep before. And when you think about it, I don't think we really thought about it when we we're like, hey, I need you to distill something for the next 5 weeks. We don't think about the labor that goes into it. And so we had to start pulling a lot of things that I think on the back end were more labor intensive. So we kind of got rid of using all of the fancy equipment, where we stopped distilling things. We looked at how we could be quicker with making our ice rather than using like the intricate small shapes. So we wanted to stay true to what we were doing without having somebody on the back end kind of, I guess, spending all of their time doing a small, really, descriptive project.
I just want to echo what Alexis just said, that and it kind of ties back to our earlier discussion about purging inventory. Like, there has been this process of simplification. You're doing more with less. And, we have one bartender, we used to have 3. And so, we've got more resources on the floor, but we also had a liquor room full of liquor, and we had to push it out. So, we're looking for drinks that people that walk through the door want. And sometimes we've had to sacrifice creativity to get there, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think? Go ahead, please.
I was gonna add to what Alexis was saying. It's interesting because it made me realize in like designing and developing places that you develop a place to think that it's going to succeed, and fine dining especially, or larger scale places, you need to have a certain threshold in order to make it. So it's not even about 25% occupancy. It's about my kitchen's downstairs and I can't run food without a few extra bodies in order to run food upstairs. So it's been sort of a blessing and a curse in that, like, we look at all of our spaces and we're like, we're fucked at 25%. There's no way that we can survive. There's no way we can even get food from the kitchen to a guest working in our regular spaces without having more labor than we're going to have in sales. So it is a struggle, and it is a decision you sort of have to make of like, what do I do? It's not even like, or am I cutting corners? This place wasn't set up to have such little revenue compared to what you actually need as a break-even point in order to succeed. And look, everyone has issues. So like the smaller places have an issue of space. Like they can't have enough tables, whereas we can maybe have enough tables. It's too big of a restaurant or too big of a facility to actually run. So for us, it's it's been sort of fun in working on the rooftop, which is an event space, which is way easier to run. But all of those like service points that you're teaching your team, you're actually putting them into play now. It's almost like you've been teaching everyone, or you've been preparing everyone for a test, and now it's really that test. So that part's been great, but then the part that you struggle with is like, how do I actually continue doing what we do in any way, shape, or form with the restrictions that exist right now?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's the challenge that will continue to be top of our list is, we all have very clear visions for what our operations are and what we want to fulfill from it, and have all these challenges that are getting in the way of that. And to be able to make incremental progress towards that optimism that everyone kind of expressed earlier into 2021 is I guess the shining light to not go crazy, and more importantly to maintain focus. So I think we're kind of running through time here. Is there anything quickly anyone else wants to chat about before we call it a day? Ryan?
Well, I mean, it's just quite a big point to throw in at the end, but I think it's, it got alluded to earlier, and is, it's difficult because we're trying to rebuild our immediate businesses, and we're trying to like solve what's closest to us, because as it's all being highlighted, it's kind of it's a very difficult thing to try and solve. And yet at the same time, I think, this juncture, I think a lot of people express the sentiment that we're also trying to look at the fact that our industry kind of doesn't work. And how can we make sure that we, focus on that immediate term survival, because we can't rebuild if we don't actually have anything to rebuild. But, we need to set this up better. We need to, try and find ways of looking both at the kind of immediate sense and the big picture. And, I think that's where the strength of the community is going to come in, because we're all learning off each other about how we can adapt and work our businesses around. But then, how do we also build into each section of that all of us trying to find ways of making this work better as an industry. And I mean that both from a kind of business sense, but it is a business sense all round. It's like the human side of this business. You know, how do we, you know, make sure that our industry is safe and attractive to as wide a group of people as possible? And you know, it's clear that it's not. And you know, I don't think that we're worse than any other industry, but there is a lot of history of things being like both problematic and swept under the carpet. So you know, that there is a responsibility both in the individual sense of how we get our businesses going for our teams, but it's also a kind of shared responsibility of how we set this up to be the industry we want it to be for the next generations as well.
I mean, that's a whole other seminar in itself. Like,
I know. I was like, God, I want to talk about this for so long. And luckily, there is not to fulfill my role as somebody on the education committee for Tails, but there are a number of seminars that are grappling with either the kind of macro conversations around what has this exposed about our industry, as well as kind of specific initiatives within, be it equity, be it just how we structure our businesses in a kind of a architectural sense. Cool. Well, thank you all so much. I could honestly talk with you for so many hours, and I know I have late at night with most of you with drinks. And I guess I wanted to do a sober version of that and get all of your good ideas and see your faces. So again, I just want to thank you for taking the time. I know we went a little bit over, but I'm really hopeful that some of this conversation gives perspective to members of our community who aren't seeing things from our same view, and maybe they get some good ideas out of it. So thanks again, be safe out there, and best of luck in these coming months. As always, if anything I can ever do for any of you, I'm always here.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Alex.
For everything. I'm taking notes.